All right. So again, Halli Reid, thank you for joining me. And so I actually have this very brief bio that was in your original email that you sent me to the magazine, and it goes like this. Halli Reid has short stories and poetry published in We Should Be Monsters with Renaissance Press, Tesseracts with Edge Science Fiction and Fantasy, New Spaces with Lintusen Press, and many others. Her genres range from horror and science fiction to fantasy and poetry. She is a creative writing instructor and a structural engineer with essentialedits.ca. In another reality, Holly is a linguist and a pirate, sailing the shores of ancient alliterations, plundering dialects, and discussions. She chides children for their tripping tongues and late literacy and expensive expressions. She remedies the unreasonable, softens the suffering, and empowers the emancipated. All right, and so you were published in SAMJOKO, I think it's been a while now, more than a year or two ago. And we are doing an interview with the poems you have that you have published. And so before we begin, do you have a poem ready to read?
Yeah. The waste of time in three parts. Now, the three parts kind of go together. So do you want me to read all three of them?
As long as it's about 2 minutes, it's fine. 2, 3 minutes is fine. So you can read as much as you want to, as long as it's about 2 or 3 minutes. But before you
Yeah.
begin, can you just say your name and then the title of the poem, and then go ahead and read wherever you're going to read?
Okay. My name is Halli Reid. My poem is called A Waste of Time in Three Parts. Part one. My ex-husband was building our dream home on land that wasn't his, my inheritance, a quarter section with a fallow triangle where the pivot didn't reach. Among the weeds, he poured a concrete pad. He had the walls up, talked up his design the whole family would love, as if he could read our minds. Yet he was shook when I left him, and the dream house sits fallow in the triangle of weeds that the pivot can't reach, on my inherited land. The walls collapsed, the brand new windows never installed, and could have been salvaged for a refund. Sorry, darling, if you can't know my soul, and you can't know your own. We are justified in thinking it was a complete waste of time. Part two. My daughter borrowed the truck, a vehicle not hers, inherited from my ancestors. An old Ford F-150, seen many years as a homesteading farmhand, but she needed a ride to a party, and the truck must have been relieved to be used so frivolously. And I let her take it since all the dignified work was done. But her inexperience tipped that truck into a lake, and she came crying back to me to save it. I packed up the tractor, the bus, the tow truck, the ancestors, and rushed to the lake to salvage the truck, like maybe I could salvage my daughter. And as it turned out, I could. I didn't even need any tools or tows, merely my bare hands, for the truck of my ancestors was light as a feather, and I saved it from drowning in an instant. So sorry, darling, if you can't know my strength, and you can't know your own. We are justified in thinking it was a complete waste of time. Part three. And what about you, my love? Will we build a house together? Will the foundation be borrowed or salvaged or stable? Will you put the family truck to good use or drive it into the lake and come crying back to be saved? So sorry, darling, if you can't know my trauma and you can't know your own. We are justified in thinking time doesn't matter. It isn't time we can count on. Time was never ours to begin with. Only distance matters in the end. Only distance or the lack thereof.
All right, and thank you so much. And so I always ask the poets this question. I don't know if it's fair or not, but I still ask it anyway. So the first question is, why do you write poetry?
Um, I think I have a few different reasons. And one of them is because I like to break grammar rules. Writing in prose means that you have to have sentence structure, and punctuation, and poetry gives you the permission to break any of that. So if the second reason that I write poetry is to express emotion or to be understood, then I'm not trying to follow the rules of grammar to try and create literature. I'm trying to make a connection. So using incomplete sentences or, phrases like that can show the emotion better sometimes than grammar rules can. And then the third reason is because to me, life is a metaphor. And when we can connect those metaphors or make the parallels between what reality we have and what reality we perceive, then we can find clarity.
And a follow-up, what is your follow-up to that question? What's your process of putting the words, I guess, on the page, on the computer? Do you start on your phone when you're walking
Mm-hmm.
around? You have a notebook. What's your process of actually putting down the poem?
Yeah, all of those things. I use paper, computers, phone, whatever seems to be handy at the time. I am kind of traditional, so paper and pen is my favorite. But I have these notebooks with me everywhere I go. And I think the first thing that I try and write is like the raw emotion of how I feel about a certain event or a certain situation without trying to explain the situation. More, I'm trying to explain to myself how I feel. And sometimes that's it. That's the whole poem, is just creating that understanding. Sometimes I clean it up a little bit and make it more fluffy or more, exposition so that it makes more sense to the reader. Sometimes I don't care if it makes sense.
All right, and that actually goes to the next part. What is this poem about?
Um, a waste of time in three parts is kind of the idea that generational trauma can follow us wherever we go. And if we have um, issues or if we have experiences that have caused sorrow in our life, it's really easy to pass it down to the next generation. And so, with the metaphor of the truck, for example, it was really easy to act the same way to my child that I was acted upon when I was a child. And if we need to fix problems, especially other people's problems, how does that affect us? How do we ignore our situation in order to maybe give the wrong message to somebody else? But I think with the idea of the house not being finished and the truck, being pulled out of the lake, those kind of major issues are right in front of our face and are very obvious to see. But having an unfinished marriage might not be as obvious because there isn't a physical, tangible, visual thing showing us the evidence of an unfinished marriage. But having that unfinished house is very stark and very like you can't just get rid of it. You have to do a lot of work. So I think mentally and in our hearts, we have to do a lot of work in our relationships that we don't see. So yeah.
Okay, and then that goes, I guess, kind of segues into the next question. What tip would you give on writing poetry?
um I think for people who want to express themselves, that you can write, you can describe a scene, and using descriptive language is very nice and beautiful. But if you want to make a connection, then you find the darkest part of your soul and you try and understand that, because all human beings have a darkness within us. And when we want to make a connection, we show that vulnerability, we share that vulnerability. So to me, yeah, finding the darkest part of your soul and talking about that. It's not
And then,
easy.
oh yeah, and then along with that, so I taught for a long time in Korea, and we seldom studied poetry, but when we did, the kids didn't like it because when they read a poem, they could never understand it. They could never understand what they were reading. So we read one or two lines, and they would kind of want to give up, but they couldn't. And so, what
Yeah.
tip would you give on how to read? Reading means to understand the poem.
Yeah. And there's always like a surface level image to a poem, but you have to be very curious. You have to want to know what the hidden meaning and the hidden depth is. So I think that being curious and wanting to know has a lot to do with it. So, especially for students, if they don't want to know, they're not going to find it. They're not going to find the understanding, but it's an opportunity. And I think that if they realize that it's an opportunity for them to understand themselves, that they will want to understand what the author is trying to tell them to.
I'm just curious, but do you when did you start becoming interested in either A, reading poetry or B, writing poetry?
Like always, since I was
Okay,
a little kid.
since
Yeah.
childhood.
Yeah. It
Okay,
kind of, I don't think that it was something I ever discovered. It was just always part of who I was.
okay. And then finally, can you mention actually any poem, doesn't really matter, any poem or any poet that I'm sure you could probably mention a lot to be honest, but one that you felt was exemplary and then why?
Um, I I think that especially because we go through like a curriculum in school where we study a lot of classic literature. And I think that's important because some of the first poems that we have from human civilization have been based upon, or we base a lot of our writing on that. So I do a lot of kind of the classics. So I'm going to say The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. And I think that anybody who studies literature should know works like that because they are moving and disturbing. And we've created like this great metaphor for regret in The Raven. And so it shows how you can do it, how you can take, a physical object and turn it into kind of a metaphysical thing. So yeah, The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe is one of my favorites.
All right, and actually that's about it. And so before we go, do you want to give a shout out meaning to anyone, any organization, anything you have coming out? Because again, I think this is like this bio is probably 2 years old. So you want to give a shout out to anything at all?
Actually, I have some short stories that have just been published in Dead Bird Publishing, and the book launch for that is just after Christmas. But they did these great dual anthologies called Supernatural Parables, and one is called Into Darkness, and it's a bunch of stories that kind of are about despair, and then Into Light, which the stories are about hope. And so I've got a despair story and a hope story, and they, mirror off of each other. So I'm really looking forward. The first Into Darkness was published in November, and Into Light is published in January. So yeah, get them both. I don't know.
All right, cool. And actually, again, thank you so much, Holly, for joining me. And that's actually it. So I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop recording now.
Cool.
Let's see.